Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I will recap and explain a recently released interesting thriller-cum-horror movie called The Inheritance. The movie opens with Drew and Hannah who are heading to their ancestral home. Drew's dad, Charles Abernathy, is a rich billionaire who had just turned 75. Today is his birthday and he had invited all his kids for a meeting. Here we see two twins, Madeline and CJ. These guys are chief executives at two different billion-dollar companies. The fourth daughter is Cami, who is a social media influencer. These guys were meeting after 2 long years, and as we can see from their looks, there is bad blood in them. None of them knew why their dad had suddenly invited them out of the blue. Now the security head Miles invites them in, and interestingly, at the house, there was no other stuff. Apparently, Charles had made them go only for tonight as he wanted to spend the night with his children. He welcomed all of them and felt surprised to see Hannah here, as he had clearly mentioned in the invitation that children only. Hannah admits that she is crashing in as she was eager to wish him on his 75th birthday. She thought he would be happy to see her as she and Drew had planned a surprise gift. Now Charles drops a bombshell. He says he is going to die tonight before midnight. Someone is trying to kill him. That's why he had locked himself in this house and made the security leave the house. He says, "During my lifetime I made too much wealth and many enemies. There are many mistakes that I regret, but the nature of the world is such that one can't do well in life without taking some shortcuts, and that shortcut is haunting me today. I ask you, my children, to protect me tonight so that I can live." Then he reads the inheritance will that he had drafted, which clearly states if he survives tonight then the money will be children's. All will get equal, otherwise everything will be donated to Abernathy, the foundation. This comes as a surprise and shock to kids as they have never prepared for this. They all think Charles had gone mad, or this was some kind of a sick test to test their character. Charles had prepared everything in advance. He had fitted windows with bulletproof glass so that nobody from inside could escape. And the doors were also sealed. He now asks Hannah to leave the house, as this task was only for his children. Hannah insists on staying as she too is ready to help if Charles is telling the truth. CJ and Madeline conclude that Charles has lost it. This is just a last-minute effort to make the family whole again. On the other hand, Hannah wondered if he was telling the truth. What if there is a chance, even 1%, that somebody might be after him tonight? Drew and Cami were sold on this idea as they decided to look around the house for anything suspicious. Whereas CJ and Madeline retired to their room. Cami starts with a wine cellar where antique wines are kept. Obviously, she was more interested in drinking them than finding it out. Drew tells Hannah about an antique room, in which Charles had collected many historical artifacts. He was deep into the occult, which was sort of a creepy thing. As Cami was searching in the cellar, she heard a growling voice coming towards her and felt something or someone observing her in her dark. She in panic made a noise, rushed back to the door, but the door was somehow locked. It turns out, CJ had locked the door for a fun prank. But, in the cellar, we clearly see someone's shadow on the wall. Drew and Hannah meet Charles to know more. They ask politely, what the heck is going on? Charles repeats the same, and he says, "You won't believe me if I told you. You will call me crazy." In the game room, CJ was playing pool. Suddenly his glass fell on its own, and when he went to see it, strangely scattered balls on the table were arranged correctly. This freaks him a little. On the other end, Cami is busy making reels in this lockdown situation. While shooting the video, she observes a shadow figure behind her. She in panic checks it out, which turns out to be nothing. As she heads back, someone attacks her from behind. She drops into the swimming pool with her phone. We see her getting strangled, and after some time her body floats with blood all over her. Madeline joins CJ at the game and proposes the idea of a hostile takeover of the empire in the garb of Charles's ill mental health. She gives an example of another corporate guy whose kin had done the same thing. Drew and Hannah heard this, but they were worried more about Cammy as they had not heard from her for quite some time. All these guys now start to search for her and soon in shock discover her body. CJ blames himself for this mishap as being the eldest. He should have kept an eye on her, but he was busy in plotting takeovers. Madeline on the other hand thinks this as an accident, but her suspicion rises toward Hannah, who is new to this family. Perhaps she and Drew might have killed Cammy for inheritance and made it look like an accident. This enrages Drew, who levels the same allegation against the twins. Hannah calms down these guys and asks what if the killer is already in the house. These guys then inform Charles about Cammy's death, who feels sorrow. But he refuses to open the door. He says things will get worse from here, as we reach midnight. The killer who wants me dead is no human but an evil spirit. Years ago I made a deal that cost someone to lose their life. Today it is hunting me. Charles now modifies his will. He transfers Cammy's $2 billion share to Hannah, who by choosing to stay earned her worth. Now, these kids have to save this old man from a supernatural ghost which seems insane to twins. CJ picks up a gun, locks Charles in his library, and starts to retire to his room in disgust. Drew and Hannah suggest searching for this supposed ghost, which irks CJ. He thinks it's all the plot of these guys to grab the money, which is now evident from Hannah getting $2 billion. The twins had never liked Hannah. Apart from being borderline racist, they couldn't digest the fact that Charles allowed Drew's marriage to some nobody. As Drew and Hannah started searching, Cammy's body was missing. Someone had dragged it away, which freaks Hannah. She now wants to run away from this place like Usain Bolt, but the house is locked. Hannah, by saying to hell with the money, started smashing the windows with no results. Drew stopped her as he knew another way out through the antique room. Inside her room, Madeline sensed a ghostly presence in the form of Cammy's image. She later tells CJ that she liked a boy in college, but Charles rejected him due to his status. He didn't object to Hannah in Drew's case. The twins believe Hannah and Drew are replacing them, even though they have worked hard and dedicated their lives to Charles. These two decide to finish off them for good. In the antique room, Charles had collected quite a lot of antique artifacts, statues, and portraits from the history that Drew's mom believed to be cursed. She thought all this would haunt him one day, so she protested it. Charles had made a separate elevator for this room instead of bringing the items from the main door. As Hannah tries to go out from this, she gets stuck and starts crushing under some invisible force. Drew quickly grabs her from there, but it's evident that something is not right. Suddenly, all the statues in the room turned towards them and started staring. The lights went off as well, with items falling on them. As these two started to escape, they saw a glimpse of the ghost, and it was horrific. Just then, they heard a knock from their dad's room. While rushing there, they saw the vault being open. By guessing Charles might have rushed there, these two entered it. As soon as they went inside, CJ locked the vault. He planned to kill these guys inside. Soon, the oxygen inside would deplete as vault was fitted with an exhaust fan. As the twins breathed a sigh of relief, they too heard their dad's knock and saw a shadow figure following them. As Madeline went ahead to check it out, she saw only the footprints coming toward her. Then, something lifted her up in the air by her throat and started dragging her. CJ saw all this in horror and followed her. Next, we see Madeline in her room, in front of Cammy's portrait where blood was dripping from her face. Soon, an evil entity in her shape emerged from it and attacked Madeline. CJ with his gun rushed to stop it, but it was late. The entity now marched towards him. He in panic fired the gun, which hit Madeline, who died on the spot. CJ in horror tries to rescue her, but he fails. He then heard the same knocking voice again as he was haunted by an evil entity. At the same time, Madeline's body disappears on its own, which frightens CJ. He now understood his mistake. He ran to the vault and released these two. The oxygen was almost over there. Drew and Hannah thanked him without knowing he was the one who put them there. CJ now asks them to figure this out with Charles as he steps up to fight the entity with one bullet. But the entity was smart, it started chasing Drew and Hannah, who were running like hell. They lock themselves in a room, where they find another hidden room. Inside they find lots of occult stuff, summoning spells, and ritual books. From all this, Hannah understood that Charles had made a deal with some supernatural entity. Meanwhile, the entity now terrorizes CJ and forces him to jump from the top. Later it takes the shape of Madeline to suck whatever life is left in him. Time is now close to midnight, the entity is strongest with its power. It starts chasing these two, who quickly enter Charles's room. Here finally he explains his action. Charles's forefathers were super rich, but by the time of his father, they had lost all the wealth in different scams. To get out of this dirt poverty, he made a deal with a demon called Mammon. He is the demon of greed. The deal was to take Charles's soul on his 75th birthday for riches. This made Charles a filthy rich person, and now it's payback time. Charles was content at first, but after seeing his wife's death, a greed of legacy grew in him. He wanted to leave behind his name on this world for an eternity. Hence he renegotiated the deal with the demon. His bloodline for his mortal life. That is why he had called his children tonight. That is why the demon is killing them. They were here to save Charles by sacrificing themselves. All this comes as a surprise to Drew, who thought he knew his dad. Charles without any hesitation removes his gun and kills Drew in at point-blank shot. Hannah starts crying in shock as she never imagined this could happen. Charles in his defense says, "I asked you to leave the house repeatedly. But you choose to stay." He now fires at her as she is a witness. Hannah quickly ran from him. Once outside she grabbed CJ's gun, which had one bullet. When Charles rushed at her, she fired at him. Now, the time had passed midnight and Hannah reveals to Charles that he won't be the last Abernathy. She is carrying Drew's baby, so the bloodline is still intact. Drew wished to tell this as a present to Charles on his birthday, but things turned out otherwise. Now, since Charles couldn't finish his end of the deal, the demon takes his life. The next morning Hannah walks out of this mess in sadness, as she never wanted money, she loved Drew and wanted to share his family, who were the greediest bunch of criminals. With this the movie ends. The movie actually reminded me of COVID-19, when all the movie shootings were cancelled and only indoor shootings were allowed. The whole movie is set in a house, clearly suggests that this might be a pending project of that era. The movie highlights the ugliness of human greed. Charles had everything in life: money, power, family, and yet he ended up dead. His initial deal with the demon was out of destitution, but soon the seeds of greed turned him into a monster. He ignored his twins in their childhood and pushed them so hard that they started resenting him. Cammy outrightly rejected his wealth to build something on her own, and Drew took up the foundation work to reduce his guilt. In all, even after being super rich, Charles suffered, and in the end, greed got the better of him. He could have died easily, peacefully, and with dignity on his 75th birthday, but greed forced him to do otherwise. His desire to leave a mark on history like John D. Rockefeller cost him everything. He died in vain. All the money went to charity and perhaps will be used for good. Hannah was clear not to touch this devilish money, as she was sure it would do harm one day. The movie is enjoyable with a bunch of jump scares, but overall it's an average movie. I hope you liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel and thanks for watching.